Version 1. The Unknown Youngest. Before the military jackets and the empowerment anthems, there was Janet Demita Jo Jackson, the youngest child of the most famous family in music. Growing up in the shadow of the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson meant that expectations were crushing, but opportunities were scarce. By the time she was a teenager, Janet had already appeared on TV shows like Good Times and Fame, but music felt like an obligation, not a calling. In 1982, at just 16, she released her self-titled debut album, fully controlled by her father, Joe Jackson. The record was bland, overproduced, and devoid of personality. 2 years later, Dream Street followed with similar results. Tepid sales, confused identity, and a young woman who felt like a puppet. Behind the scenes, her life was spiraling. She secretly married singer James DeBarge in 1984, only to have the marriage annulled months later amid rumors and family pressure. Janet was lost, voiceless, and desperate for a way out. This was her rock bottom, but it was also the moment she realized that if she was going to survive in this industry, she would have to take control of her own life. Version 2. The Revolutionary of Control. Everything changed in 1986. Janet made the boldest move of her young life. She fired her father as her manager. Then she flew to Minneapolis to work with 2 young producers named Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, architects of the Minneapolis sound. Together, they crafted Control, an album that wasn't just music. It was a declaration of independence. With its funky bass lines, crisp drum machines, and Janet's newfound confidence, the album became a cultural phenomenon. Songs like Nasty, What Have You Done For Me Lately, and When I Think of You weren't just hits. They were anthems for anyone who had ever been underestimated or controlled. Janet's image transformed completely. With choreography by Paula Abdul, sharp outfits, and an attitude that radiated self-assurance, she became a symbol of female empowerment in the 80s. Control sold over 10 million copies worldwide and turned Janet Jackson from Michael's little sister into a superstar in her own right. She had taken control, and the world was watching. Version 3. The Social Activist. After conquering the charts with Independence, Janet aimed higher. In 1989, she released Rhythm Nation 1814, a concept album with a mission to address the social issues plaguing America: racism, poverty, drug abuse, violence. Janet tackled them all with military precision. The album's iconic black and white aesthetic, with Janet in a paramilitary uniform, was striking and unforgettable. This wasn't pop music for escapism. This was pop music with purpose. The numbers were staggering. Rhythm Nation became the only album in history to produce 7 top 5 singles on the Billboard Hot 100. It had #1 hits across 3 consecutive calendar years, a feat no one had achieved before. It was the best-selling album of 1990 and cemented Janet as not just a pop star, but a cultural force. In 2021, the album was inducted into the National Recording Registry for its cultural and historical significance. Janet had proven that pop music could be both commercially successful and socially conscious, and she had done it on her own terms. Version 4. The Sensual Goddess. After saving the world, Janet wanted to explore herself. In 1993, she released Janet, a bold, intimate, and sensual album that celebrated her sexuality and womanhood. The minimalist black and white cover, featuring only her first name in lowercase, signaled a new era of vulnerability and maturity. This was Janet stripped down, literally and metaphorically. Songs like That's the Way Love Goes, If, and Anytime Anyplace were slow-burning, seductive, and undeniably adult. The album debuted at #1, making her the first female artist to achieve that in the Nielsen SoundScan era. Her star power was undeniable. She signed a groundbreaking $40 million contract with Virgin Records, one of the largest deals in music history at the time. In 1995, she reunited with her brother Michael for Scream, creating one of the most expensive and iconic music videos ever made. Janet was at the peak of her powers, a global superstar who could do no wrong. She had mastered the art of reinvention, balancing commercial success with artistic integrity. Version 5. The Explorer of Depths. But Janet wasn't satisfied with just being a pop icon. In 1997, she released The Velvet Rope, her most daring and introspective work. The album was dark, complex, and deeply personal, addressing themes of depression, self-loathing, and sexual freedom. It explored BDSM, same-sex relationships, and the search for self-acceptance with a raw honesty that was revolutionary for mainstream pop. Tracks like Together Again, I Get Lonely, and Every Time showcased a vulnerability the world hadn't seen from her before. It was a risk, but it paid off. The album was a critical triumph and solidified her reputation as a true artist. 4 years later, she returned with All For You, a joyful, liberating album born from the ashes of a failed marriage. The title track was infectious, the album sold massively, and Janet proved she could pivot from darkness to light with ease. This was the absolute peak of her popularity, the moment where she was universally beloved, critically acclaimed, and commercially unstoppable. But that peak was about to crumble in the most devastating way. Version 6, The Unfairly Banished Star, February 1st, 2004. The Super Bowl halftime show. In front of 140 million viewers, Justin Timberlake ripped off a piece of Janet's costume, exposing her breast for a fraction of a second. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Janet was blacklisted from MTV and radio, her music videos banned, her career suddenly in freefall. Justin, he went on to perform at the Grammys a week later. The double standard was glaring, cruel, and inescapable. The albums that followed, Damita Jo, 20YO, and Discipline, were unfairly dismissed. Critics accused her of relying too heavily on sexuality, ignoring the artistry within. Sales plummeted. Her contract with Island Records was terminated. For the first time in 2 decades, Janet Jackson felt invisible. She had been punished for something that wasn't even her fault, and the industry that once celebrated her had turned its back. This was the lowest point of her career, a fall from grace that seemed impossible to recover from. Version 7, The Mysterious Absence. After the storm, Janet disappeared. For 7 years, from 2008 to 2015, she released no new music. She focused on acting, starring in films like Why Did I Get Married? And For Colored Girls. She embarked on a small tour in 2011, revisiting her greatest hits, but it felt like a farewell. In 2013, she secretly married Qatari billionaire Wissam Al Mana, retreating further from the public eye. Rumors swirled that she had retired for good, that the world had broken her spirit. The absence was deafening, and many believed that the Janet Jackson era was over. Version 8, The Unbreakable Legend. But legends don't stay down. In 2015, after 7 years of silence, Janet Jackson returned with Unbreakable. Reuniting with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, she released an album that was mature, soulful, and deeply personal. It was a love letter to her fans, a tribute to her late brother Michael, and proof that she was far from finished. The album debuted at #1, making her the 3rd artist in history to have #1 albums across 4 different decades. Critics hailed it as her best work since The Velvet Rope. Janet had done the impossible. She had reclaimed her narrative, rebuilt her legacy, and reminded the world why she mattered. She wasn't chasing trends or trying to compete with younger artists. She was simply being Janet, authentic, powerful, and unbreakable. The comeback wasn't just about the music. It was about resilience, about refusing to be erased, about proving that a true icon can never be silenced. From a voiceless teenager controlled by her family to a global superstar who defined independence, Janet Jackson's journey is one of constant reinvention and unshakable strength. She taught the world that control is earned, not given. She showed that pop music can be a force for social change. She proved that sexuality and artistry are not mutually exclusive. And most importantly, she demonstrated that even when the world tries to tear you down, you can rise again, stronger than ever. Janet Jackson isn't just a pop star. She's a revolutionary, a survivor, and a legend. Her legacy lives on in every artist who dares to take control of their own story. Now, the choice is yours. Head down to the comments and tell us which music legend you want us to analyze in the next Version Vault.